Now, historians tend to think of visible gay and lesbian communities as restricted to large avant-garde cities. New York City, San Francisco, Toronto, Montreal, or sex-segregated environments such as the military, boys and girls colleges, and so on. When I asked my colleagues where in Canada they would predict as the launching pad for the first lesbian prosecution, no one suggested Yellowknife. So I'm going to talk about the Willie Mae Moore case, which began in 1955 when Willie Mae Moore was charged with indecently assaulting a woman with whom she worked in the typing pool of a federal government office in Yellowknife. Indeed, during the era that I'm talking about, rape was defined as a crime that could only be committed by a male person upon a female person. But Willie Mae Moore's prosecution appears to be the first criminal trial for sexual assault in Canada that involved a female complainant and a female accused. As such, I think it is possibly the first lesbian criminal sexual trial in Canada. So how did I find the case? I began by looking at every reported case and a sampling of unreported cases of sexual assault decisions up to 1975 from provincial archives in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Ontario, Quebec, and Nova Scotia. In total, I pulled up 1,202 cases. And the only one amongst that huge sample of cases to show a female-to-female sexual assault was this one. And despite the needle in a haystack discovery, it was hard to miss. The Alberta Court of Appeal used the word lesbian and printed it with a capital L. In 1952, for the first time, Canadian immigration law was amended to bar homosexuals from entry. During the late 1950s and 60s, the RCMP recruited psychiatrists to oust gay and lesbian perverts, as they called them, from the civil service. It seems no accident then that it was a federal government official working in the Department of Northern Affairs in Yellowknife who turned Willie Mae in. Willie Mae Moore was an American citizen by birth, probably in her 40s when she arrived in Yellowknife the fall before her trial. She flew in with a woman named Beatrice Gonzales, who appears to have been Willie Mae's lover. A brilliant young woman from a working class background, born in 1907 in Vancouver, Beatrice Gonzales began her studies in history and economics at UBC. And she emerges out of nowhere from the dusty archival court records as one of the most illustrious, if hitherto completely unknown, lesbians in Canadian history. It would have been unusual at the time for a working class woman to get one degree, but she compiled a bachelor's degree and master's degrees from the University of California, the University of London, England, and Columbia University, and she pursued postgraduate work in Geneva. She worked for the Peace Disarmament Committee of the Women's International Commission, and then with the Women's Service of the ILO. In 1938, as Hitler's troops were moving into Czechoslovakia, the Czech government hired Beatrice for refugee work. And before war broke out in 1939, Beatrice masterminded spectacularly dangerous escapes for Jewish refugees. She evacuated thousands to England and elsewhere. She was arrested 2 times by the German Gestapo and then released. And it was there where she was awarded the highest civilian award in Poland, the Polonia Restytua Medal. And we know some of this because some of the refugees whose lives she saved came to look for her after the war and tracked down her much younger brother, who was by then a professor at UBC, and they asked him to thank her because she had saved so many lives. And he said he knew nothing about what she had done to evacuate Jewish refugees in the war. In 1949, Beatrice moved back to North America, to New York City, where she took a posting with the World YWCA. And the New York City typist she hired to assist her was none other than Willie Mae Moore, who came recommended by the personnel department of the American YWCA. It is unclear why she and Willie Mae left the New York City Y. It may have been due to the discovery of her lesbian relationship with Willie Mae, or the breakdown of her health, because her family back in British Columbia was advised that she had had a nervous breakdown. Her brother, who was not in touch with her at the time, thought quite likely this was due to the ill health and stress of her war work, but it is also possible that it was due to forced detention because her lesbianism had been discovered. At the time, psychiatric detention, electroshock, behavioral modification, drug regimes, all of these were commonly used to try to treat lesbians. With the help of a cousin, Beatrice Gonzales appears to have got herself out of the hospital detention, and she and Willie Mae traveled together out west, where Beatrice taught briefly in Burns Lake, northern British Columbia, and Barrhead, northern Alberta, with Willie Mae by her side. And then the two moved together to Yellowknife in the fall of 1954. Now, it is remarkable that a woman of Beatrice Gonzales' accomplishments would take a teaching post in such outlying regions, even a position as vice principal in Yellowknife. And her students described her as having a presence about her that commanded immediate respect. One said, "You paid attention when she walked into a room. You knew that she was a somebody." Now, Willie Mae's prosecution was as devastating to Beatrice as it was to Willie Mae. Willie Mae's sexual overture began with a typed love letter to a female co-worker, and it culminated in an attempted kiss over a game of Scrabble. Although Beatrice was clearly betrayed by Willie Mae, who had become smitten with her co-worker typist, it was Beatrice who took charge of Willie Mae's defense, who served as the key defense witness in court, insisting in vain that the love letter was not Willie Mae's and that the indecent assault had never occurred. Right on the heels of the trial, Beatrice was summarily discharged from her post at the Yellowknife High School. Some of her students said that they wondered whether the administrators thought that Beatrice Gonzales would be attacking the women students next. Her students put together a petition for her reinstatement, and the school admonished the group that they didn't know all the facts. Well, let me bring you to Yellowknife. Yellowknife is a glacier-scarred, rocky outcropping on the edge of the Arctic Circle next to Great Slave Lake. In 1955, travelers arrived on small DC-3 planes flying 700 air miles north from Edmonton on a milk run that could take 7 hours when the planes ran on time. As one of the bush pilots reminisced, when it was a mere 20 below, we'd think, boy, this is a great day. We can push back our parka hoods. The town was memorable for tiny houses, board sidewalks, and no long-distance phones. In 1955, virtually all of the inhabitants came from somewhere else. The unifying characteristic was a strong streak of individuality and nonconformity, with residents glorying in the thrill of isolation. They were all running from somewhere, reminisced one former resident. And social norms were substantially looser than in the South. There was a boisterous drinking culture and a wider sense of sexual license. And in some of the books that were later written about Yellowknife history, there were accounts from the young women who flew up to Yellowknife to work as secretaries and waitresses, who reminisced about the amorous assaults they were at the receiving end of from drunken bush pilots, miners, and taxi drivers. So it's the kind of environment in which an attempted kiss ought not to have been noticeable. As testimony would later reveal, Willie Mae had previously been married, and she was the mother to 3 children. But this was not something she boasted about. And it was news to everyone in the courtroom and puzzled observers who then tried to get their minds around how a capital L lesbian could be both a wife and a mother. Now, there was no definition in the criminal code of the term indecent assault, but the trial judge convicted Willie Mae Moore on the facts of the attempted kiss over the game of Scrabble. The grabbing and attempt to kiss were the assault elements, and the typed love letter from the, quote, sexual invert provided the judge with the circumstances of indecency. Court officials seemed mystified about the precise nature of same-sex female sexuality. The prosecutor asked whether Willie Mae Moore was a homo-sexual. And then he asked the all-important question. He said, homo-sexuality is some sort of sexual relationship between 2 women? And the response of the defense witness was, frankly, that was not my understanding of the term homo-sexual, which I have always understood to mean a relationship between 2 men. Criminal law had always concentrated on gay male sexuality. Canadian medical experts explained that for anatomical reasons, most acts of sexual deviance were, quote, only possible of male indulgence. One of the most interesting lines came from a judge speaking to his all-male jury, and he said, frankly, gentlemen, I had to get the dictionary to know what it was about. I venture to say that most of you are the same. The trial judge even stated that he could not conceive that the witness would falsify her account, adding, did she invent this incredible story? There was no attempt to paint the victim as consenting to the kiss. It was as if it was unthinkable that a woman would consent to a sexual overture from another woman. Now, that comment from the trial judge, did she invent this incredible story, inspired me to go looking for some background on the Honorable Jack Gibbon, who was the magistrate who heard the trial in Yellowknife. One of his court clerks left a memorable impression of the man. Gibbon, John E., was a little man, physically not much over 5 foot, chubby, rosy, well-scrubbed, immaculate in dress. The last is a key word. The first impression of Gibbon was that he had just emerged from a shower, parboiled and pink, barbered with extreme care, then clothed in fresh linen. Sordid cases, I think, left him with a feeling of having been personally besmirched. At the end of a day's sitting, he would shower interminably, as though to wash away the stains. So you get the picture of the man in the trial hearing the case. And Willie Mae Moore was sentenced to 3 months in the RCMP guard room at Fort Smith. There was no prison in Yellowknife. Now, even less is known about Willie Mays' victim, the stenographer in the Department of Northern Affairs office. She had worked for the federal government in Ottawa before moving up to Yellowknife in the summer of 1953. She left Yellowknife almost directly after Willie Mae was initially convicted, and her destination is not recorded. I have not been able to track her down, so I have not used her real name either in the chapter or in any of my public discussions of this case, and her future life and career is unknown to me. She may still be alive, and I hope that someday she may hear about this case and that she may get in touch with me and give me her own perspectives about the trial. Willie Mae appealed her verdict, and in that era, you had to come down from Yellowknife to Edmonton to the Alberta Court of Appeal. And there, the case split the court. 2 judges of the 3 overturned the conviction, and theirs was the majority decision, on the ground that there was no hostile act accompanying the circumstances of indecency. One judge in dissent emphasized the act of indecency and insisted that the conviction should be sustained because it was an invitation to lesbianism, capital L. Now, something of Willie Mae's personality comes through from the typed letter that she sent to her co-worker. And this was read out in court, in open court. And I would invite you, as I read some of the extracts, to imagine what it would have felt like if you were the accused woman having this letter read out in open court. Dear Laura, you made it clear to me that my type of life is quite foreign to you, and even were it not, that you'd not have any interest in it. That I can understand very well. I wish there was some way of making you understand just how I feel. You probably feel that women with me are just a weakness, which, like most weaknesses, can be gotten over with a bit of willpower on my part. That's not true. Women to me are as important, in many cases more important, than the food I eat or the water I drink. They are a vitally important part of my life. And should the time ever come when I might be denied any relationship with them, I may just as well stop breathing. It's been tried before, and I almost lost my mind. I would never ask you to change. That would be very foolish. Any such thought of desire would have to come from your side. I do ask, though, that you be a bit tolerant of me. In any case, you surely have nothing to lose. Nothing I could do to you would faze you in one way or another, and would certainly leave you unblemished. How many men can say that? If you feel at this point you simply don't want to have anything to do with me whatsoever, you need only say, I'll understand and keep my distance. Willie. Beatrice left Yellowknife directly after the criminal prosecution, and she did not surface again, I haven't been able to find out where she was until 1962, when the Edmonton City Directory show she was again teaching at various public schools. Willie Mae was no longer living with her, although another female teacher was. And so whether Beatrice and Willie Mae kept up their relationship is still unknown. Willie Mae also left Yellowknife immediately after the trial, and I have no further information about her life or career. But no sooner had I finished the writing and the research for this chapter of my book, when our lengthy efforts to track down the appellate lawyer who represented Willie Mae bore fruit. And his name was Louis Bernstein. And my brilliant research assistant found him, retired and living in St. Louis, Missouri. And he agreed to do a short telephone interview with me. And he offered the startling coup de grace. He mused that Willie Mae Moore probably would never have been prosecuted if she hadn't been black.